For the most part, I was a social drinker, and I would only drink with my friends or when there was a social activity going on. But eventually, it got to the point where if the stress got too much, that the alcohol really became a coping mechanism. Throughout my life, there was a lot of death. But in 2005 is when my dad passed away, very suddenly, and that hit me harder than I'd ever been hit. My dad, I put so much faith and trust in him that without him, I really didn't have anybody to turn to. It was really a turning point in my faith. That was the time that I turned my back on Christ. My heart was, man, it wasn't even lukewarm, it was cold. I had already been a pretty heavy drinker at that point, but depression all of a sudden kind of entered in my life. I was very Jekyll and Hyde with my personality and with my emotions. I was typically fun to be around, but then there was this dark side of me, and what happened on December 29th of 2015, it was a perfect example of that. I had been out that day, I had lunch with my niece, and I had had a couple drinks, and I get home, and there was some fussing going on between my wife and my daughter over the medication that she wouldn't take. So I tried to force my daughter to take her medication, and being a 3-year-old who doesn't want to take medication, she bit my finger. My immediate response, I kicked one of her toys, or I kicked something across the room, and I raised my fist to her. Long story short, my wife was afraid that I was gonna harm the children or myself on this night. And the cops were called to check on me and to take me to Brazos County Jail for mental observation. It was there that I really began to pray and ask for forgiveness like I had never prayed before. That's where everything really started sinking in. After my night in jail, I was transported to a behavioral hospital where I stayed for almost another week, 6 days in a mental hospital. When I came home, I didn't know what to expect. My family wanted me home. I could have been placed into further observation, but my wife, she wanted me home. I was grateful from the get-go that Candace accepted me back home, because she could have easily turned her back on me and left. But I think the Lord worked through my wife. There's no doubt that He put her in place to get me through this. My prayers have been answered, and they continue to be answered. I don't know why. I don't feel like I deserve it. I still get worked up. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I'm not perfect, but there is a lot more peace and calm. My heart's soft. It is so soft. My relationship with my children and with my wife is better than I had ever anticipated to be, and it is because of my faith and God's grace, and I've been able to stay sober ever since then. And on Easter Sunday, it'll be 474 days. I am a follower and a believer in Christ because there's no human that could have rescued me from the place I was in. I mean, He kept me alive through that, the whole ordeal with the police. He's kept me sober. He's kept my family intact. Who else is there to thank? That's why I believe.